Hey, how's it going? Welcome to Life in Comedy. I'm your host, Will Beckton. This is a podcast about comedy and the people who make it their livelihood. My guest today is Jackie Clarke, who is a dear friend. I first met Jackie when we both performed at UCB in New York, not long after the theater opened on 22nd Street. Jackie was a member of the legendary house team Respecto Montalban and has since gone on to become a very successful TV writer and showrunner. I always enjoy talking to Jackie. I'm here with Jackie Clarke, showrunner, TV writer, and amazing improviser, and an old friend. Jackie, thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
So I figured, we know each other because of UCB, and so I figured we'd start there.
And I introduced you to your wife.
Yes. So a debt that is hard to calculate. But,
yeah. 2 children.
Yes.
They owe me.
Well, I could start calculating some of that. But. So how did you find out about the theater, and when did you find out about the theater?
When I started doing UCB, like late 90s, early 2000s, they didn't even have a theater yet. They were doing classes. My first class was with this guy. I bet it was your first class too, Armando Diaz, who's a great Chicago guy and great teacher. And it was at this place called, is it Solo Arts?
That sounds right, yeah.
It was like a 4 or 5 flight walk up. And I remember we would do, we were like in a 101 class or whatever. And I remember, it was like on Saturday afternoons, and they told us to be quiet one day because Madonna was getting her haircut below us. And we were like, oh, yeah, well,
do some
totally
quiet scenes.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, ma'am. So I did stuff there. And then I think pretty quickly after that, they got their first space on 22nd Street, which was some sort of burlesque plus theater, or I don't know. There was some sort of, I remember it being
pretty plus. Like people,
it was pretty plus, yeah.
When I used to work in the office, people would come in that didn't know it had changed hands, and I think they were expecting to see some stuff.
Well, it definitely was on Real Sex, that HBO show. So it was showcased on that. So it was some sort of like live pornographic theater. I can't tell you exactly what it was.
Oh, like an Amsterdam sex show kind of thing?
In that neighborhood. Yeah. I do remember, though, there being an open mic. It was like Wednesday night at midnight or something. And I do remember this guy did the open mic. He was like some 40-year-old businessman from Texas. And he's like, I used to come to the strip club when I would come in town on business, but he's like, it's closed. It's a comedy theater now, so it's an open mic. I guess I'll do stand-up. And we were like, this is perfect. And like the crowd was so supportive and so kind, but I was like, this is pretty weird.
Yeah. I remember the first time I talked to Andy when I started working at Conan, and I just told him that I'd seen it because he used to do the ASCAP monologue a lot. We were just talking about how quirky that theater was. Walsh had told them like how filthy it was when they cleaned it.
I think there was a lot of like condom sweeping.
Yeah, a lot of condoms mixed with broken glass, like pretty gnarly.
Welcome to comedy.
It was very homey. And then you, of course, were in Respecto Montalban, which is, for some people, if you ask them, they would say like, the Swarm or Respecto. Mother, also awesome, but an amazing collection of talent. I'll just read it just because it's pretty nuts. Owen Burke, Chad Carter, Jackie Clarke, Donna Fineglass, Rob Hubel, Rob Riggle, Paul Scheer, Danielle Schneider.
Yeah, everyone on that list is pretty funny.
No duds.
No duds.
Dudless list.
Yeah. You're always like, am I the dud on that list? Maybe I am.
How did Respecto form?
Those guys all kind of formed and then brought me on, which was nice. But they all knew each other a little bit more than I did. I was like I say a generation, but it's like a series of classes behind.
That means like a year or two in that
exactly.
world. Yeah.
So I was a little bit after them. Those guys were, I think, really taking the truly first classes at UCB. But yeah, they pulled me on and I got along really well with all of them. And Donna and Danielle hosted my baby or bridal shower. I can't remember which one. But yeah, they're the best.
Yeah, it was such an amazing team because it had like the swagger of like Riggle and Hubel, but then like the brains of an insanely good collection of female improvisers on that team. Like,
well, I just think at that time it was definitely, improv is still sort of like
boys clubby.
It's a boys club, and it just sort of is what it is. But I don't perform anymore. So, but as I was, getting older and I was like, the scene was becoming more diverse and having more women and more, it's like there was like one gay person in the whole theater.
Yeah. Mark Sam was the only person I can remember that was out.
Maybe, Hiller, Mark Sam, I guess Hiller's later. I was thinking about Trent Strobe, who was on my first team. You always sound so old when you talk about, like, back in the day, it was so fun. But I'm like, it was definitely like a much more eclectic group of people that weren't trying to just make it in showbiz. Yes. There was a lot of people that just want, like, do you remember that guy was it on Mother? He was like mapping the human genome. Kept not being able to go to shows. He's like, sorry, I'm mapping the human genome. And we're like,
it wasn't
what?
Dan Goldstein, was it? Like,
no.
He was another big brain guy that there was always like an advertising guy that was curious or like a housewife that was bored or something. Like, it was not all people just trying to punch their ticket.
Yeah. And obviously, like, we're punching our tickets, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it made for a really interesting, it just was an interesting group of people. And even the people performing weren't all interested in trying to make it in showbiz. And I think it was Ed Snibel's idea, and I forget the name of this group I was a part of. But anyway, he got a bunch of us to pose for this. I think it's Spencer Tunick would do those photos where it was just like a bunch of nude people in fill in the blank. And this was like a bunch of nude people at sunrise underneath the FDR bridge, like downtown. And so there's like this photo in my home of just like a bunch of butts.
Oh.
And I don't think my butt is in it. But I have, because my children are like, which butt is yours? I'm like, that's the butt of mommy. It was just really interesting where I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to go and stand all night and pose in this Spencer Tunick photo.
Yeah, you had like the whole Changwin thing that like Kurt Braunohler did. Like that, those were insane. It was a half chicken, half skunk, and a half chicken, half penguin that were mortal enemies.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, and those were insane. They would like shut down like all of Houston or all of Broadway. It depended on like which part of town they hadn't already been not welcomed back in or whatever. But I remember going up to like a roof of a building on Broadway and like filming the half-mile marathon or whatever. There were definitely some like thinking outside of the box people. But yeah, and then also as far as like just well-rounded existence people, like Riggle was like coming back from tours in Afghanistan and stuff.
He was like deployed.
And he was also, I loved this, he was like a cigarette rep or something. So he would like just be like passing out cartons.
Yeah, he worked for Philip Morris, and then at one point they I forget what it was like Altria. We're now Altria or whatever they changed their name to, and we're like, we still know you're an evil company, Philip Morris.
Yeah,
can't fool
just
me.
Change it to something that sounds like altruism.
Yeah.
And then another great group that you were a part of was Death by Roo Roo, which is Anthony Antamanik, Neil Casey, Jackie Clarke, Brett Gelman, John Gemberling, and Curtis Gwynn. Another insane batch of talented people.
Yeah.
How did Roo Roo form? Were you guys all friends, or was it more patched together?
We were all friends and wanted to start a group. That was a really fun group. And then Adam Pally and Gil Ozeri joined later. I loved that group. I thought that was a really fun, good collection of boys. I do remember though driving down, what was it called? Like the Dirty South Improv Fest or something?
That sounds right.
But this was like an improv festival. So Roo was going to did perform there. And we're living in New York City, okay? This is an important fact because we're driving down to North Carolina. We get the 15 passenger van or whatever we're driving down. And then almost immediately in New Jersey, we decide to stop at like a Dick Clark restaurant and like sit for like 2 hours and have like a really leisurely meal. We're like, why did we do that? We made no time at the road. And then like for some reason, everyone was starting to get like road belly, and it was just getting gross in the van. And it was just one of those trips where I was like, I can't be the only woman. This is so gross. And I remember screaming at Brett Gelman because he kept farting in a Cold Stone Creamery. And I was like, there are children in here. And I remember it was iPod days, and I was sharing a room with Neil Casey and Anthony Atamanuik. I mean, no better guys on the planet. But I was like listening to my iPod and it had a cord and they were farting so much. I remember thinking like, maybe the cord will hang me in my sleep. Like maybe I can just be done with this strap in this one way.
You actually like thought that through.
Yeah. Because everyone was like, don't do that. It's dangerous. And I'm like, yes, maybe it's that dangerous. Maybe my pain will be over. And then the next year I was like, I cannot come with you. They're like, you can bring a girlfriend. I was like, what girlfriend would I bring to I would never subject another woman to this.
And then did you guys do the fucked up family format the whole time? Or was that just for part of the
I think it was the whole time. I think it was kind of like as that group was coming together and we were going to do a show on Fridays, we wanted to do a mono scene, which is like, it is what it is. It's as advertised. It's one scene in one location. But we would interview someone from the audience and we would ask about their lives. And it was, I mean, there were some wild stories.
Yeah.
There were some wild stories.
There was one where Gelman really this audience member was really annoying to Gelman because when you're interviewing an audience member, you're like trying to get information out of them. It almost doesn't matter what the information is. It's just like, please just talk and give us some fuel for this thing. But this guy, like whenever he would be asked what he did for a living, he just said high technology.
Yes.
And then he wouldn't really volunteer anything else, which is fine, but he volunteered to be interviewed. So it was very frustrating. So Gelman ended up playing him in the scene and basically like, it's high technology. You would understand it. But like it was one of those times where the improviser was basically talking through the character, like giving shit to the person.
Oh my God, those guys were so funny.
Gelman, had he done the little bit of luck thing yet at this point? Like
he had done a little bit of luck. So Greg Gelman did these ads. Gosh, we should get these going on the internet. That would be hilarious. And I remember that he did these ads for the New York Lottery. And I remember, it's like we're all living in New York and people would get the weird, you'd get a lot of like VH1 jobs where you're just writing like, I don't know, the top 10 reasons why Christina Aguilera is better than Britney Spears or just all this like mindless bullshit that is now all free on the internet. But he got this commercial acting gig where he was like the spokesman for the New York Lottery and he played this little like shrunk down character named like Little Bit of
Luck.
Luck.
A foot tall or something like that. Like it was really small.
It had a lot, like had a real Spuds MacKenzie, like dog sexually involved with women, like sort of.
Somehow forgot that part of it. I mean, nothing seems more dated than Spuds MacKenzie. Zima,
Little
maybe?
Bit of Luck, maybe.
Yeah.
Not by any fault of Gelman. I mean, he was funny in it, but it's like this idea of it's like this like very obnoxious, lascivious, like tiny luck character that's like looking up women's skirts. And you're like, what year is this? This is like post 9/11. Why are we doing this?
Who's going to be in the final episode of Mad Men?
Yeah, exactly. Who my son will become obsessed with is like, you know that guy from Stranger Things?
So when you were there, did you have a feeling that you were kind of at a special place at a special time?
I don't know. I mean, I tend to not be good at stuff like that. I mean, I thought everyone was great and I thought everyone was so funny. I mean, I wasn't surprised when people like, I remember when Andy Daly and Donna Fineglass got Mad TV and we had this huge party for them. And I was just like, oh my God, like these people are so talented. I just thought everyone was really talented, but I think also it didn't quite occur to me that you could like make money doing this. I think it occurred to other people.
Yeah.
Maybe not to me at the time. And I think for me, at least, I was like really trying to figure out my voice and how to be good at, what I was doing. But like you were saying too, it's like people were just very creative for the sake of being creative. Like there was a lot of not trying to monetize stuff, it seemed like. And that, not that that's like, I'm not saying that as like, and they're such, they're heroes for that. I think it was, everyone's just trying to work their stuff out. Like I sort of feel bad for the people in LA because I was like, I had so many shows where I just sucked so hard. I ate it so hard.
Yeah.
But no one cared and it was just part of the thing. And it was just part of the culture there. Whereas I feel like when you're in LA, you're just like, oh my God, an assistant from Paradigm was there. My career is over. And But you also don't want to be that person that's like 50, still improvising for no money, you know?
It's tough. I mean, I just remember just trying to get stage time.
Yeah.
To me, that was like the main goal. And I didn't really see too far beyond that, I don't think.
Do you remember the guy that, like, I forget what his name was. I think he did like a lot of photos, but he tried to open a theater in his studio apartment.
Oh, no. Not Spiro.
I think it was Spiro.
Oh, yeah, Jason Spiro.
I think it was Spiro. I think so. I might not be right.
Oh, my God. Like a practice space or like a full-on theater?
Oh, God. A studio apartment. And it was like his loft bed. And you were supposed to like perform under the loft bed. And I can't remember if I was there or if there were just reports of cockroaches. And we're like, we're not performing there. But it got pretty far. I mean, it was a New York apartment. It wasn't necessarily his fault. I mean, it's like if the building has cockroaches, you have cockroaches. But
yeah. Pretty good indication of how desperate people were for stage time.
Oh, totally. I mean, yeah, you couldn't get, and then that's when other theaters and spaces would open, which is great. But especially in New York, it was just impossible. Like people would be like, my doctor's office will let me use the lobby on weekends. You guys want to do a show here? We'd all be like, yes, of course we would.
Yeah. Freaks Local was great. That definitely helped a lot of groups kind of get on their feet.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're a writer. Do you feel like improv, having both studied it and also performed, like altered your brain in any way? Or
oh, yeah.
Are there any like improv rules that kind of double as writing rules? Or can you think of a way that it's opened things up or allowed you to sort of access things that you might not have otherwise?
So my main gig is I do like TV writing, and my main gig is I usually do comedy. And I think you're never going to make money being an improviser. The closest, like the most parallel line, I think, is a TV comedy writer's room.
Yeah.
Because it's very collaborative. Like even in these like short episode orders, it just chews up material. It just absolutely chews up material.
Just a hungry beast.
Oh my God, it's insane. It's insane. And because of comedy, you have to have story and jokes. You're just absolutely like chewing up you're feeding the beast constantly. So this idea of, okay, that didn't work great. I'll have another idea. I'll have 10 more ideas. And that there's no one right way to do something. I think that you need all these different sort of voices, I think is a really good model for, going into TV writing, at least on the comedy side. I would imagine it's helpful in drama. I think drama is just much more plot-based.
Yeah.
Obviously, you don't have a joke room. And a joke room is the best place on earth.
Yeah. I've never really been... I've been in a writer's room, but I've never like reported to work in a writer's room. I've never like gone into a writer's room like day in, day out.
People do so many bits in comedy rooms, and so much of it is the camaraderie of jokes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, Conan, a lot of the famous bits, especially McCann, because a lot of those were just like ridiculous things or whatever, but a lot of those were just fucking around in the writer's room things that they were like, hey, write that up.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, did you ever try stand-up?
No, I did like one person stuff, but I'm just not really, my brain just isn't really, I've like taken stand-up classes like a million, even before UCB, but I'm just not a stand-up person.
Yeah, I kind of came to the same conclusion.
Yeah.
And then one of the cool things, I don't know if you think about this as like how siloed this part of your life is, but when you were on radio, when you and Jake
it's very siloed. Incredibly silent.
So that was on K-Rock? Am I remembering that correctly?
I think you're right.
Yeah.
That was Howard Stern's first thing, right?
When I was trying to look it up, I couldn't tell if it was on K-Rock or Free FM. But
it became Free FM.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what it was.
But it was you and Jake Fogelnest. And Jake Fogelnest, for the people that don't know, I don't know how old was he, like 16 or something? He did
he did Squirt TV.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, I think he was young. He was a little pip.
Yeah, but he had like Sonic Youth in his bedroom and stuff like that, like an interview that like he's definitely like hyper intelligent and very almost impossible to stump. Like to try to like get a pop culture reference by Jake is basically impossible or whatever. Did you enjoy radio? Did part of you think of that as something that could have been a long-term thing, or did that just seem like a odd, like, hey, I'm doing radio?
So to me, it was a very natural extension of like hosting or interviewing or something, or improv. You're just like kind of being funny. And we did the stupidest bits, which I really, really, really loved. Like old Conan was really my inspiration for some of the bits, or I think for both of us. It wasn't just me, but I remember one of the bits we did.
Old Conan mean like early Conan?
Early Conan, yeah, not current day Conan, old Conan. JK. No, he's old. I'm old. I mean, he's much older. But we did this bit where we were like, it was really fun to play with the form where we, like, for weeks would promo, we're like, we're going to have lesbians on. We're going to have lesbians on. And then we had Julie Klausner, and we'd have our friends come by and just do characters and stuff. But we had a couple girls come by and then just play like bookstore lesbians, you know?
Yeah.
And
it's almost a proto Portlandia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, they were like really young kids that would listen to us and think it was hilarious. And then they were like security guards on the night shift. I still remember this guy calling in and being like, you better tell those lesbians to get busy. And I was like, what is happening, sir?
Oh my God.
So that part was really fun. But I will say, like, so you've got, like, you were saying, like, okay, so improv culture is really like bro-y. It's a women's college compared to stand-up. And then, like, basically radio is just like men punching women. Like, it's just the grossest form. It's just horrible.
Wow.
I just found it's just a gross... There's a lot of gross people in radio.
If it's not like This American Life, if it's like Morning Zoo stuff or whatever.
It's
like,
pretty gross.
Yeah, I can picture that.
It's pretty gross. And it was lonely. Like, I would get home at like 3:30 and I'm like, there's no one to talk to, you know?
That's isolating.
Yeah.
And you and Danny Bonaducci were paired together at one point, right?
I was paired with a bunch of people just as like they were just trying to, and I was like, I'm getting $150 every time I do this. So I'll just say, yeah. So.
It's like jury duty.
Yeah, totally.
So the radio thing kind of brings us to me meeting Amber because at the time I was in LA working on a documentary, had a screening in New York, invited you because I was like, Jackie's on the radio. Maybe she'll mention this on the radio. And you're like, can I bring a guest? And I was like, of course. And you brought Amber, who became my wife. And you also eventually performed our wedding.
Yes. Yeah. It was the one time I was like, don't be funny. Yeah. Yeah, that was really fun because I remember I was at the Soho House. I was like, do you want to go to the Soho House? And I was like, you'll like my friend Will. You should make out. And now you're making out for life.
The other funny thing about that is my bachelor party, I had it at UCB. Like, we went to Gelmania.
Oh, yeah.
And you were in Gelmania, and you played, I'm trying to remember, it was like...
Isn't it as like landlord or something?
Yeah, you were like an elderly landlord lady who was like sexually blackmailing him or something like that. There's something,
sounds about right. Sounds very Gelman.
But you were saying like really filthy stuff, and I was like with my groomsmen being like, she's the one that's going to be performing.
Like, oh, cool.
So I always think of it as like the late 90s, early 2000s, or almost like kind of late 90s was like the massive Chicago to New York migration.
I think so, yeah.
And then there was sort of a similarly big migration of New York to LA that happened a few years like down the line.
When did you guys come out?
I came out to work on the documentary in 2004, but then we ended up living together in New York for good 2007.
Okay,
we were like fully here in 2007. You know, obviously not an easy transition. When I first got here, there was no UCB theater.
Yeah.
I remember getting an email from Seth saying he was like, there was one opening up. He was going to be the artistic director. I was like, oh my God. Just because I thought kind of I had left like that whole part of my life behind, and who knows if I'm going to keep in touch with these people or whatever. But was the move to LA easy, not easy? How would you characterize it?
I mean, I was very lucky in that I had a job when I came out here. I was doing a voice on a TV show, on a cartoon. So that was great. And that was like a pretty cool experience. But I do remember being like, I don't know how to be funny out here. I was like, it's too sunny. It's too... I don't know, life is a little too easy. I don't know.
Wow.
There was just something about it where I just also did it. I'd always been an East Coast person. I was raised on the East Coast. And so it took me a beat to sort of figure out, like, what is my sense of humor out here? And then I didn't have that job anymore. And I was like, why am I in LA? And it was really hard for me to get work. And I wrote this sketch show that I did with Gil Ozeri that was... Now that I look back, I think, like, that was really weird. I was in a really dark place.
Amber talks about this show quite a bit.
I mean, I do love this show, but it is, I remember we weren't married yet, but my now husband, Sam, would come to every show. And now I'm like, wow, he really must like me because that show was really fucked up.
Not an easy
really
show.
was like the bottom of my, what I was going through at the time.
Oh, wow.
That being said, I very proud of that show, and I thought it was really fun.
Well, did that show have anything to do with you and Gil writing together on Happy Endings? Oh, cool.
Yeah. So when Gil and I got Happy Endings, we were never an official writing team, but they, because we were so close and we did Roo Roo, and Gil and I he's my baby Gil. He's just the perfect, although I feel like I've told you this. So Gil Ozeri is top 5 funniest people I've ever met in my life.
He's
and
insanely funny.
So purely funny. And he really has kept that spirit of just I just do weird things. And he's just so himself, and he's just so funny. When we were
physically too, really good physical.
He's so funny. When we were at Happy Endings, we kept getting, we were in the writer's room, and we were on the Paramount lot, and one of the Paramount mail people would come by and be like, there's a package for, and I forget the name of but I was like, this person's not, doesn't work here. We don't know what you're talking about. For a couple weeks, we keep getting these packages, and then we're all in a meeting, and it's everyone, and all of a sudden we hear this alarm go off in this door, and we think it's an electrical closet. Oh, Mitch Beaver. Is Mitch Beaver work here? No, Mitch Beaver doesn't work here. We're like, who? Why do we keep getting these letters and packages from Mitch Beaver? And so it's okay, finally we get another package. This alarm goes off in what we think is an electrical closet. We open the door. We're like, this is so crazy. He has set up this tiny office for a puppet named Mitch Beaver. And it has a nameplate. And there's photos of Mitch Beaver with the cast of Happy Endings that are framed. It's just this really elaborate bit. And I'm just God bless Gil Ozeri.
Yeah, I always admire long plot trajectory jokes,
that's his whole reason for existing.
So that show is obviously very loved. Would you consider that your big break?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I was kind of that was my first narrative writer's room, and I really was. I am home. I just love being in a writer's room, and that especially so it's David Casp created the show. Jonathan Groff ran it with him.
Was that the old Conan head writer? Yeah, nice.
Just such a good guy. They were both good guys, and it was just a really positive experience. You really, the nice thing too about TV writing is you kind of have to. If you're with a good showrunner, you're on set, you're editing, you're kind of doing everything. You really get a sense of, you just become a better writer because you're kind of seeing how everything's done.
Man, that sounds very appealing. Just an interesting side note is both Adam Pally and Gil Ozeri, hot sauce guys. Mm-hmm. Ben Schwartz being the other one or whatever. What an insane trio.
So talented.
That's pretty nuts. And then Undateable, that was Bill Lawrence, right? Undateable. Speaking of a good showrunner to learn from, I bet, right?
He's unbelievable. I only did the first year of Undateable. It was a multicam on NBC, but he kept it on for 2 more years. Mm-hmm. He's really just an amazing person to watch work. But he's great.
Wow, that's cool. And then Superstore, which was another well-loved show.
Yeah, I love that show.
And Colton Dunn.
Colton Dunn, so funny on that show. Yeah, he was great to work with. That was an awesome show. And I was pregnant with Esme on that show. And that was when I was staffing, it was really hard for me to get work. People would point blank to my face, be like, okay, well, it's a bad time for us. Okay, cool.
Oh, God.
But yeah, I loved working on that show. So I did 5 seasons. That show went 6 seasons. Yeah.
Wow. Was that the transition to showrunner, or when did that happen?
No, because I became an EP on that show and I started directing on that show.
That's right.
Which was really, it was great that Justin Spitzer's the guy who created it. And, I just don't think you just get that opportunity to have a show that runs that long. And those were, all 22 episode seasons. I guess the first one was like 10 or something. But, so I was an EP on that show. And then I went and did Kenan. So it's a show I created. So I ran that the first year. And then I popped over and did Blockbuster. So those are the 2 shows I ran.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, God, it's amazing how you've been able to string together gigs and have long, meaty gigs too.
Yeah, Superstore is the biggest one. It just went the longest.
Yeah.
I was on 2 seasons of 3 of Happy Endings, but yeah, so many things just are one and done or
pilots or whatever. Yeah, it's amazing to be at the mercy of
it's crazy.
Such big swings, what green light, no green light. It's like, it's my life for the next 5 years.
Yeah, and you kind of have to move on a dime and all of that. So, it's a bit of feast or famine. But
yeah. Was that a natural transition or did it feel weird to not? Do you still feel like part of the gang writer's room wise, or do you feel sort of slightly removed now? Or
yes and no. You are, but you realize there's a text chain that you're not on,
Yeah.
Like as a writer in a writer's room, I'm like, oh, my job is to derail the situation and to do bits and not to do work. And as the showrunner, you're like, no, I have to keep things,
train's got to run on time.
Yeah, you're just a bit more the conductor and stuff.
Yeah.
But I like it a lot. And it's, you're also supposed to, a little bit more of how the sausage is made. So
Yeah. One of the goals of this show is to sort of explore comedians, both what makes them unique as far as like their medium of choice, whether they're a stand-up or an improviser or a writer or a humorist. And some of it's relatively arbitrary. Some of it's just kind of the hand you're dealt or the opportunities that came in front of you.
Yeah.
Especially like the big things people are known for. A lot of times that's just like this door opened.
Totally.
Since you're kind of from an improv background, I'm curious, do you think of yourself as an improviser still like at your core, or does that feel like comedy college?
I would say a little more comedy college, but I don't mean it in a disparaging way. I also sort of feel like, and this is just my opinion, I feel like improvisers should retire. And not that you can't perform, but to me, doing You See Me and all of that, it's like so much, like even at the time, especially in New York, the idea of monetizing it was just like, it didn't even occur to me. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, people write TV. You just are like, you just watch it and you just think like, that could never be me, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just like, I had to do it because I really loved being creative and I was just trying to figure some stuff out about how I wanted to live my life. And then it's like, oh, I could live my life in this way, but it's never the goal. The goal wasn't to stay on stage. Like, yeah, I understand when people want to like, yeah, let's get the gang back together and do a show. But it's like, it's important to leave.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge proponent of not performing.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because sometimes I'm like, oh man, like, what if I had kept at it? Like, would I like attain like Chad Carter level improv skills or whatever? And then part of me is kind of like, I don't know.
Well, Chad was one of those guys that he would write quickly. You know what I mean? He was so like the math of it all.
Yes.
Like it was very much not how I improvise. I was very much.
You're more visceral, like
it was
reactive,
just which is why it was like good to have me and someone like me and someone like him in a group where he just had Neil Casey is the same way. They just have like a
Ian
skill
Roberts,
set.
I would put in that category. I love the tools. I love the friendships.
Oh, yeah.
And I love the tools. But yeah, it is an interesting thing to sort of figure out what to do with as you go through life.
Yeah. I do think it's like, I don't know, like it definitely made me a better parent. Like when my kid is like, can you put a mustache on me? I'm like, Yeah. I can put a wig on you.
Yeah.
I can put a mustache on you. Like
if Amber catches me like being rigid with the kids, if I'm just like not going with the flow, she's like, yes, and like, and that's all she has to say. And I'm like, oh, okay, I drifted into like stiff dad mode and didn't realize it or whatever.
It's a good, there's a reason Amy Poehler named her book that, it's like, it is a good philosophy.
Yeah.
Although I feel like I'm yes and until I have to say no.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, I say yes to everything, and then you're like kind of like, wait, I am really busy. I can't say yes to everything. But you can also do yes next week.
Yeah. Well, speaking of being really busy, thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, yeah,
this was so much fun.
So fun to think of some of those stories. It's like, oh my gosh, some of these people, they're just gems.
Yeah. Well, I just remember like back in the days when Curtis Gwynn and John Gemberling were just like a unit, basically. They were just like one, almost like
they
one.
Were there, yeah.
And their place in New York and how that was kind of the clubhouse. Not too different from when you and Seth Morris moved out here. Yeah. And that was kind of like the welcome center for a lot of people.
That's really sweet. Yeah. Well, one story I will say about Roo Roo, because I did say that story about how I wouldn't travel with them again. But so Curtis and John lived kind of like in Kips Bay, right? Like on the east side, Murray Hill-ish. But they lived right near, they had a profoundly disgusting apartment.
Yes.
Just like you'd much rather go to like a White Castle to use the bathroom than theirs. They lived right near this Rite Aid, and I remember like hanging out with them. We were like watching a movie or something, and like I remember Atamanuik and Gemberling was part of it, but they had gone to Rite Aid and they found this like 4-foot doll for like $12, and they were like, we think you should have this. And like the proportions were all wrong. Like if you made her a real person, she'd have like 38-inch boobs and like 12-inch waist. Like it was just like but that became like I did Christmas cards and she was like my daughter. And then like when I did that show with Gil, I used that doll. Like that doll became like a muse for me in this really weird. But I was like, oh yeah, those lovable dirtbags, those like river rats are the ones that like gave her to me.
So it made the move to LA?
Like it's still in my garage.
Oh, nice.
Much to Sam's dismay. I actually had to buy another one. No, she's like, can I have this? I was like, no, it's mommy's. She's like, okay, lunatic. But yeah, Gil destroyed the first one. I mean, fine. It was like in the show. And I kept putting that, like taping the arms back on. And so I was like, I gotta find a Rite Aid where I can buy a backup. I don't think they sell them anymore. Only at Rite Aid. It's the weirdest doll ever. But yeah, they're good boys.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Jackie Clarke. I really appreciate her candor when it comes to improvising later in life. On one hand, I kind of think of improv as a young man's game, but that might be just because the prospect of performing regularly seems exhausting to me personally. There are plenty of great improvisers who I'm glad still perform, like Seth Morris, who I just saw last week. But I do think it is a very personal choice to continue to prioritize that in your life. Jackie is kicking ass and seems very at peace with her relationship with improv, which to me seems like the important thing. Life and Comedy is recorded at Jett Road Studios. Please rate and review the show and follow it on Instagram and YouTube. Thanks for listening.